Hi, I'm Steffany Strange. Want to hear something scary?
Emmy was overjoyed that her grandmother Setsuko agreed to spend time out with her. Given that her grandmother rarely went out, being nearly 100 and tired from a challenging life, it was a big deal. Her grandmother had always been a serious and dedicated woman. Emmy deeply valued these joyful, relaxing moments with her grandmother, especially considering her age and the uncertainty of time she had left with her. Emmy held her grandmother's hand, leading her to the candy store for treats. But as they approached the entrance of the sweet shop, Setsuko froze like she had seen a ghost. She was standing face to face with something that stood outside of the shop, something that was seen in many candy stores across all of Japan. The wooden statue of Peko-chan. Setsuko was panting heavily and clutching her heart with wide eyes. Emmy didn't know what to do. She had led her to a nearby bench where she could sit down. "What's wrong?" Emmy asked. Setsuko took a breath and in a choked whisper told Emmy that she knew that girl. "What girl?" asked Emmy, looking about and seeing no one nearby. Then she saw the statue. "Oh, do you mean Peko-chan?" Peko-chan was the mascot of a Japanese candy called Milky. She's known to have chubby cheeks, pigtails, and a red ribbon in her hair, always seen with a big smile on her face, licking her lips. The company's slogan is "Milky tastes like mama." Emmy was confused. How could her Sobo know the mascot? But Setsuko insisted she knew Peko-chan. The statue's likeness reminded her of a girl she knew during World War II. The girl was named Peko and she was 6 years old. She lived with her mother in a small Japanese village. During the war, there was a tremendous food shortage, leading people to starve and look for food. Peko and her mother had to drink muddy water just to stay alive. They chewed on grass and the roots of trees as a desperate attempt at keeping their hunger at bay. Finally, Peko's mother couldn't bear to see her daughter suffering any longer, and so she took a knife, cut off her own arm, and offered it to Peko to eat, not telling her what it was. And as Peko ate, she realized she had never tasted anything so good in her life. When she discovered where the meat had come from, she was sick with disgust. But then she remembered the flavor. She couldn't forget the sweet taste of her mother's flesh. When her mother became too weak and vulnerable to defend herself, Peko, overcome by the primal instincts within, proceeded to inflict fatal injuries upon her and subsequently consume the entirety of her mom's body. Addicted to the taste of human flesh, Peko continued her life as a cannibal. "It's just sickening," Setsuko said. "The way they have her licking her lips. It's like the way she licked her mother's blood off her rosy red cheeks." Rearrange the sounds of the word milky, and it becomes "kill me." She continued. Those were Peko's mother's final words, begging her daughter to take her pain away. Emmy started observing the candy in the shop window. She realized the slogan of the company, when translated from Japanese, is "Milky tastes like mama." Emmy had another horrifying thought. "What about Peko-chan?" she nervously asked, instantly regretting the question the moment it slipped from her lips. Her voice filled with a combination of curiosity and apprehension. She couldn't help but wonder what the response would be and how it might shape their conversation. It's important to note, the candy company also has another mascot named Peko-chan. This time, it's a young, smiling boy who always wears a blue hat. He is said to be Peko-chan's boyfriend. Setsuko shook her head sadly. Peko was a 7-year-old boy who lived in Peko's neighborhood. After devouring her mother, Peko was still hungry. So she attacked Peko, breaking open his skull in order to eat his brains. Peko was in such pain that he bit his own tongue and swallowed it before he choked and died. The reason Peko-chan never has his tongue out in pictures on the candy bars is because he doesn't have one. And the reason he always wears a blue hat is to hide his broken skull and missing brains. Setsuko started to cry, the memories becoming all too much. Emmy tried to calm her grandmother, but she knew that the way her grandmother was reacting, that this was deeply something so horrific in her life that it shook her this badly. Also, seeing this smiling, cannibalistic little girl selling yummy treats doesn't help the cause. And who knows what makes them so yummy? After all, the company's slogan is "Milky Taste Like Mama." As the resemblance between their products and human taste intensifies, one wonders how long it will be until a mere candy fails to satisfy their customers' desires, leaving them yearning for the authentic experience. Alon's tired eyes gazed ahead at the dark road. He had been driving the Jeepney, a popular minibus in the Philippines, for 12 long hours, picking up and dropping off passengers. Once the last passenger was off the bus, he was eager to return to his comfy home, to his sweet daughter who had been waiting for his return. While heading home, his attention was drawn to a silhouette on the roadside. It was a slender teenage girl, barely noticeable in the dim light. A feeling of duty resonated within him. With the late hour and the empty road, he couldn't simply abandon her. What if she was his own daughter in the need of help? Letting out a sigh, he guided the jeepney to a stop. The teen felt nervous and cautious as she got into the empty vehicle. But when she looked down the long, dark road ahead, she knew this would be the better option. As the minutes passed, the girl's tension eased, and she felt more comfortable telling the driver her name was Stella, and she had been so busy with her training for a varsity track meet, she lost track of time, thus leaving much later than expected and had no service on her cell phone to call for a ride. After she explained her situation, Alon glanced into the rearview mirror to look at her, but his heart fell into his stomach. What he saw wasn't the girl he had picked up. Instead, her body was headless, and the rest of her body was in a gruesome, bloody state. What happened to the cautious teenage girl? He thought. Alon swerved the jeepney back onto the road, his breath getting stuck in his throat. He turned around quickly to look at Stella face to face, and to his relief and confusion, she was whole and intact. But now Stella was the one shocked and confused at the driver's state. Is something the matter? She asked. Her anxiety of being alone with a strange man was returning. Something didn't feel right, and his creepy behavior only fueled her unease. Alon apologized, explaining he was just tired. This was his last journey of the night. As time passed, Stella began to wonder if she'd made the right decision. Maybe the driver had bad intentions. He was certainly acting strange and staring at her creepily in the rearview mirror. She checked her phone. Still no service. With slight fear, Alon peered into the mirror again and gasped. There it was again. Her headless body, deep gashings covering her arms and chest, and dripping with blood. The driver abruptly hit the brakes, launching himself out of his seat and quickly rushing to the back of the jeepney to check on Stella. To his immense relief, he found her safe and unharmed, but visibly shaken and terrified. Stella's screams pierced his ears as she backed away. "Stay away from me!" she cried. Alon cowered, his voice trembling. You must listen to me. I promise I'm not here to hurt you, but every time I look in this mirror, I see..." He lowered his voice, whispering the words. "I see this lifeless, decapitated, dead version of you." Stella was horrified. Why was this man telling her such traumatic things? Alon guided Stella off the jeepney. He said he would find another driver to take her directly home. He gave her instructions to burn everything she was wearing, which included her clothes, sneakers, and gym bag. This was the only way to cut the horrific connection between her and the gruesome version of her he'd seen in the mirror. Shortly after he returned to the driver's seat, another vehicle passed by, and Alon pleaded them to take Stella home safely. Stella, still wary, but sensing he meant her no actual harm, thanked him. Alon managed a small smile in return as he watched the car disappear into the distance, his heart aching with the weight of his decision. He closed his eyes and thought of his daughter when, bang, a deafening crash shuddered the stillness. The vehicle that had carried Stella away had swerved into the side of the road, sending a sharp, lethal spike through the windshield. stabbing the driver through the windpipe and sending the spike directly into Stella's neck, decapitating her head in an instant. Driving on, Alon was haunted by Stella's sweet, frightened eyes and the selfish choice he made that night. He knew he was a coward, but once he saw the warning signs of Stella's death, he couldn't bring himself to die with a teen he barely knew. He had to unlink them. He knew he had to get her out of the jeepney before her bad luck brought them both down. He would live to get home to his daughter, but Stella's fate had been sealed. It had been her destiny to die. After all, you can't outrun death.
Callie was an art major who was fortunate enough to land an internship at Centennial Hall. This historic building was once a prestigious school, but is now a museum that beautifully showcases the rich history of the town. Seizing the opportunity to explore her passion for history and art, Callie eagerly committed herself to the role with unparalleled enthusiasm and determination to learn more. Callie enjoyed mundane tasks like taking inventory, but what she loved most was giving guided tours. There was something enchanting about the old museum, especially when it was hired as a venue for private events. Walking through the halls at night was a surreal experience. It was magical and sometimes a little spooky. Callie hadn't seen or felt anything herself, but she'd heard whispers upon entering an empty room and sensing a presence. This one time she heard about doors slamming and objects falling off shelves with no reasonable explanation. Being a skeptic, Callie laughed it off, not taking it seriously. That night, a local artist had hired the museum for a show. After spending all afternoon setting up, they finally welcomed guests as the sun was setting. Callie was working as a server to earn a little extra, passing out drinks and snacks to the crowd. As she was about to refill her tray, a woman tapped her on the arm. "Where is that music coming from? It's simply lovely," asked the woman. Callie frowned. She knew there wasn't any background noise playing because the artist had requested that they not play any sounds or music so that the potential buyers could chat easily about her pieces. But the woman was so adamant, she heard a wind instrument coming from somewhere near the restrooms. Curious, Callie headed towards the old music hall to investigate, as maybe a trespasser managed to get in. As she walked away from the event, the faint sounds of classical notes occasionally drifted in and out of range. Confident that the music was coming from the music hall, she decided to open the door and take a peek. As she walked into the room, she realized that it was completely empty. There was neither any sound nor anyone present. It left her wondering where the mysterious music had come from. She was about to leave when something in the room crashed to the ground. Callie jumped and saw that one of the clarinets had fallen down from its display window. It was virtually impossible for that to happen, and yet there it was. She inched towards it, starting to feel some of the unease her colleagues had spoken of. As soon as she packed up the instrument, she was overcome with extreme dizziness that sent her reeling. As she fell to the ground, the music began again, this time echoing all around her as the room began to spin. As the music grew louder, Callie suddenly began to cough. What had started as a minor tickle in her throat quickly developed into violent choking, and she found herself gasping for air, unable to breathe. The music abruptly stopped, replacing the sound of her panicked wheezing. Fortunately, her supervisor burst into the room just in time, providing the much-needed help to evacuate her from the room. Once she was out of harm's way and able to catch her breath, she began to recount the experience, still in a state of shock and feeling very upset and frightened. "Ghost Girl strikes again," a colleague whispered among themselves as they listened. But soon Callie was told the shocking story of what happened in 1944. An unnamed girl who was a student at the once prestigious school had been murdered. A talented clarinetist, she had been practicing for a recital when she began to choke and vomit, then dropped down dead. The reed in her instrument had been poisoned. When the building was closed as an educational facility and became a museum, her restless spirit apparently remained, and those who had witnessed her presence speculated she was seeking revenge. Many workers and visitors over the years had heard snippets of a clarinet playing in the old music hall, or have felt nauseous being there for no reason. No one could explain the terrifying encounter with the spirit Kelly faced, and many were sad when she handed in her notice the next morning. But what they didn't know is that Callie's family has deep roots in Valentine, including ancestors who attended the school during the 1940s. After all, why else would she relive the tragedies of the spirit? She was convinced one of her ancestors was involved in a heinous crime, and that the vengeful spirit had given her a dose of karma. So with that, Callie left hoping to never return again for fear of any retaliation or what other secrets could be buried in Valentine.
Thanks so much for listening. Like and share if this video gave you the chills. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell for notifications. See you next time.